The agenda this week considered changing attitudes about adoption and anticipated how Canada's foreign policy might shift under a minority Trudeau parliament. The agenda's week in review begins trying to understand Western Canada's reaction to federal election 2019. Lindsay, Ted, help us with this. From what I understand, putting a price on carbon is essentially a market solution to an environmental problem. And conservatives like market solutions. In fact, there are lots of conservatives today who think putting a price on carbon is not a bad idea. Patrick Brown, a former Ontario Conservative Party leader, liked the idea. Preston Manning's come around on it. Why do you think it's been such a tough sell in parts of Western Canada?
Well, nobody likes paying taxes here. Sorry. Tax is a four-letter word in Alberta. And it also, I think it got too wound up with all of these other sentiments that we're talking about here, that it seemed like it was a direct attack solely on the oil and gas industry. I mean, it's not, but I mean, it's a very emissions-intensive industry. And so those two factors get tied together. And I think it's really unfortunate. It's a nice, clean, simple, administratively easy tool. You're not picking winners. You're not picking losers. We're seeing with the tier proposal from the UCP that there's clear picking of winners and losers under that program. And so it would be nice if we could move away from that. But it's you can't sell it, and it's lost.
But don't forget, Alberta actually did have a carbon tax before anybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
That gets lost in the conversation too, unfortunately.
I want, Andrew, for you to put your academician's hat on right here and help us understand whether or not you see any potential middle or common ground on pipelines, on carbon pricing. Is there anything here we can coalesce around?
I mean, I think that's what Trudeau's been trying to do. If you take a look at public opinion surveys about pipelines, and if you ask Canadians whether or not we should build them, generally Canadians say, yes, we should do that. But if you ask them whether or not we should live up to our environmental commitments at the same time, and they'll say yes to that too. And I think Trudeau, up until now, has been trying a little bit to be all things to all people, and trying to, support the oil industry on the one hand while also living up to our environmental commitments. But I think the last election showed that that's more difficult than it looks, and that may not be a line that he's going to be able to walk going forward. So whether or not there's a middle ground that you can coalesce around, if there is, I think the Trudeau Liberals are looking for it, but they haven't found it yet.
It's pretty elusive.
Yeah.
Monty Solberg, what would you and what would your fellow Albertans like to have heard from the Liberal leader during the course of the campaign that you think maybe could have made a difference?
Well, I think we would have liked to have heard that he believes in a balanced approach to resource development and ensuring that the environment is preserved and climate change is addressed. And there are ways to do that. In fact, I would point out that the Premier of Alberta, in writing a letter to the Prime Minister the other day, did ask for a conversation about climate change and indicated he's willing to work with the Prime Minister on those kinds of measures. But of course, we also have to continue to develop our oil and gas resources. And in fact, in doing that, to some degree, we can actually address climate change. As the Premier has pointed out, and others have pointed out, the development of liquefied natural gas ports in British Columbia using British Columbia and Alberta natural gas can actually be used to reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions around the world, especially when they replace coal facilities in places like China. So there's no question that there's some direct ways to address all of this. I would also note that, as Martha pointed out, we have had a price of carbon since 2006 in Alberta. So we have been addressing these things to some degree, not enough. But the new proposal being proposed by the Premier would actually reduce Alberta's emissions by 18%, according to a lot of independent studies. So, we're striving to do our part. We're doing more than just about anywhere else in the world, and we will continue to get better. We would like some recognition for that, and we would like to see, Alberta and Canadian oil be an export around the world, because it's actually the best way for us to reduce overall emissions and ensure the highest human rights and labor standards by ensuring Canadian oil supplants foreign oil wherever that's possible.
The person heading up the foreign affairs portfolio is Minister Chrystia Freeland. How do you think she's done?
Well, look, I think obviously on the NAFTA file, where she was very heavily engaged, I think she was part of the reason why we got a deal. I think David McNaughton, our ambassador in Washington, also has to take a lot of the credit there. And they did, after a very rough start where the government was completely unprepared for a Trump presidency. It took them some time to try to find their feet, but they did try to find their feet, and they did so eventually to the point we are now on the new NAFTA, and we'll see where it goes in terms of ratification, because it's caught up in all sorts of other politics in the States right now. But on other issues, I talk to people at Global Affairs in very senior roles, and their response is, we just don't know what Chrystia Freeland's priorities are. I mean, on a sort of multilateral or a bilateral basis, we haven't seen her. We don't know what they are. On a lot of issues, it doesn't seem like she's been very present. She was very, very quiet, certainly over the last 6 months, over the SNC-Lavalin issue, and on sort of day-to-day operations of Global Affairs and our position on stuff. She seems to be pretty quiet on things. So it remains to be seen whether or not she succeeds as foreign minister. They may say they need her in another role. I've heard her mooted as a possible minister of a supernatural resources and environment ministry, with her being born in Alberta, with her sort of carrying the Alberta portfolio, which is a bit strange given she represents University of Rosedale in the center of Toronto. But, I think on some of these more intractable issues that require real day-to-day function, I don't think a lot of people could tell you what her or the government's priorities are.
Okay, yes. I'll just get Janice really quickly, and I'll come to you, Stephen.
Yeah, that's not fair, Gary. When there was an issue around SNC and Tony Wilson-Raybould, it was a really tough moment for virtually any of the women let's be honest, for any of the women in the cabinet to be front and center.
Oh, it was tough. It was definitely tough on Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. They sure got the back end of the Prime Minister's hand on that one.
No, but that's not the reason why it was tough. So
why was it tough? It
was tough because you're caught in the middle of an open debate, and anything you do is going to be interpreted as siding on one side or the other. So virtually all the women ministers actually had a very rough spring once it's exploded. I think she's made her priorities quite clear. The issue is whether all Canadians agree, but she, if you look at where she's put most time and energy after NAFTA, it's frankly been on human rights issues. Mm-hmm. Those are the issues that are closest to her heart. She has enormous interest in Ukraine. She has very strong views on Russia. She led on Venezuela. Which she
But on Ukraine and Russia, what is the difference than the Harper foreign policy? If anything, the Harper foreign policy was just as strong.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean
that's not a real differentiation of position.
But that's not what we asked. We said, does she have priorities? Yes, she does. Those are one, whether they're differentiated or not. Latin America has been a real priority for her, and she took a leading role. Which Canada's actually not had in Venezuela. So the argument in the country is not that she doesn't have priorities. It's rather, are our economic interests getting the kind of attention that they need at this particular moment?
Well, we'll find out in November once the Prime Minister picks his caucus. Right. Stephen, in a minority parliament, how much clout do the opposition parties have on foreign policy?
They have surprisingly little. One of the challenges and one of the interesting things that's going to happen is to see whether Trudeau can manipulate the Parliament as well as Harper did.
You use the word manipulate.
Manipulate, absolutely. That my colleague Phil Lagasse has a great line about how Harper was able to launder responsibility through the Parliament. Trudeau's going to need to get support for things, but once these parties support him on an issue, well, like in the past when Harper was able to get support for the Afghanistan war from the Liberals, then the Liberals can't really argue about it. And Harper, every time that he was questioned about it, said, it's not me, it's Parliament. Parliament's will is to do this, that, the other thing. And so it was no longer really being held to account for what was going on in Afghanistan. So it really depends on how clever Trudeau is. And he's got a playbook that was written by his predecessor that he can pick and choose which opposition party he wants to tie in on a particular issue. And the key thing right now is I don't think any of the other opposition party wants an election, and so you can hold that over them. You can always threaten, well, if you want to push this to the wall, let's have another election. And I don't think the NDP is ready for another election, and certainly the Conservatives are not ready for another election. And so that gives them at least 6 months of running room, if not more than that.
Why do people go abroad to adopt in the first place?
Oh, well, I think there's lots of different reasons. One of which is that perhaps the wait time is shorter. I think that's a primary reason. Another reason is that perhaps those children might be younger than adopting domestically. So I think those would be the two primary reasons.
Catherine, anything you want to add to that?
Sure. I think that sometimes families feel they have a connection to the specific country that they're adopting from. So whether they have cultural ties or sometimes families have gone on missions or they feel some type of connection to the country, so they're drawn to specific countries as well.
Kathy?
I was going to say similar things. I think that sometimes families are drawn to that specific country, but when I talk to most families, many of us who are adoptive parents truly just want to build our family through adoption. And so looking at the different options, and international is one of them, is something that most families do now.
Let's bring a chart up here and just show, oh, and I should say parenthetically, Cheyenne, you do get to speak on this program, but we're just going to lay the foundation for your personal discussion to come. And let's look at these numbers here. These are international adoptions by Canadians, and we track it from the year 2012 to 2016. And for those listening on podcast, I'll just describe the fact that in 2012, we were up at almost 1,400 international adoptions, and the numbers have declined year after year after year after year to the point where we're, for 2016, the last year for which figures are available, we're down below 800 now. And Kathy, I think we got to get into some understanding of why this trend is on the constant decline. How come?
Well, there are many different reasons. One of the largest is China was one of the largest countries that children were adopted from for over 20 years. And in the last 3 years, China's one-child policy stopped. So that's a wonderful thing for children in China if they're able to remain with birth families or extended families, but it has made a huge difference in international adoption.
It's cut off a channel for here.
It has. And there are still older children in China and children living with special needs in China who are in need of families, but the numbers are much smaller. I think also the Hague Convention has something to do with that.
What's that?
So the Hague Convention really protects children's best interests. So it's looking at keeping kids with their birth family when it's possible, with extended family when that's not possible, hopefully within their country of origin if that's a possibility, and then and only then can they look at international adoption. So that also means children are older when they join their families.
Catherine, can you talk to us as well about the fact that I think the government of Canada this past spring put a warning on websites saying, watch out for international adoptions. What was that all about?
Well, I think it's just more about looking into the ethics of it. And we want to make sure both in Canada, but also in children's country of origin, that adoptions are done ethically and that it's done through the Hague, and that the channels in which children are finding homes, whether it's inter-country or out of country, are done so in a way in the children's best interest, and that they're done so that we know that everybody is consenting and is aware of what's happening.
Mary Jo, with the numbers going down every year, what kind of an impact has that made on families here in Canada who want to adopt?
I think people are turning more to doing public adoptions through the child welfare system. And, you know, for the children who are in the child welfare system, that's a good thing for them. And there are growing complexities with the adoption from the child welfare system because of the need to keep siblings together. So adoptions are more likely to be multiple children, and children are older, and children may have multiple different needs.
Kathy, what are the kind of go-to countries now that Canadians want to adopt from?
Well, I'm not sure that there are go-to countries anymore. As I said, there's been a big change with China, but there are families who are still adopting from Thailand, from South Korea, from many different programs, but all of the adoption programs are smaller now. And like Mary Jo said, we have over 30,000 children and youth living in the child welfare system in Canada. And there is always a way to become a parent, but we need to make sure that families have resources, subsidies, respite care, and that they and their children are getting the supports they need.
We have heard a lot about trafficking. What kind of an impact has that laid over this whole issue?
Well, I'm sure it has a huge impact. As an adoption peer support organization, we definitely want to support parents and making sure that they've done their research and that they understand what their rights are, but the rights of the children as well. So what the actual statistical impacts are, that I'm not sure of the numbers, but it definitely has had an impact. And on the adoptive parent side, I think that families are a lot more weary, and they are reaching out, making sure they're doing their research and getting support from the community as well.
That's just some of what we covered this week on the agenda. For more, including the full conversations, you can visit our website. That's tvo.org. Our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.